interest into high intent website visitors. We're really excited to have a chat with you today. You've got myself, I'm Lila Waite, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Lead Forensics, and we have Pete with us. So Pete, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Lila. Yeah, so I'm Pete, and I am the Head of Digital at Lead Forensics.
Super. So let's jump straight into it. I think we do have some people still joining us, but hopefully they'll be able to catch up. Obviously, if you do have any questions throughout today's session, then do let us know, via filling out the question section. And if we ever get a chance to answer those questions specifically, we will answer them today. Otherwise, we will be sure to follow up with you after the session. So first question then for you, Pete. How do we go about increasing our followers? Let's start at base point first of all.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's quite a common question. It's one that a lot of people ask, and there are a number of ways you can go about increasing your followers. So you could expose your brand to new audiences using paid activity. You can flaunt your socials on your website and on your content. You can actively engage with relevant influencers on social media in the hope that you'll acquire a few of their followers. Or you could even perhaps engage with your current audience, encourage them to share some posts, or ask for follow referrals. I'm sure we're all guilty of @ing a friend in an Instagram competition to win a holiday in the Bahamas. But all of this is kind of worthless if we're not providing our audience with value. What's in it for them to follow you? So businesses need to really spell that out. What it is that they do, why they're different to the competition, and what value do they offer to a follower. Now, a consistent social strategy will provide a platform for the audience to grow organically. So as long as you are showing that value to a follower and to your current audience, that will grow. It's just make sure that you're communicating those sort of social USPs, if you like.
Okay, so there's lots of ways that you can grow your audience kind of organically. You don't necessarily need to do paid advertising, that sort of thing. You can, as long as you're kind of offering value, then almost like that peer-to-peer referral, and potentially, as you say, influencer to referral, can actually drive more traffic potentially. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So if you are offering that value, no matter what ways you go about it, they're going to work. Whereas if you're not offering that value in the first place, if you're putting paid activity behind that, or you're engaging with influencers, people aren't going to follow you if you're not relevant to what they're after.
Okay, so make sure you're adding value and you're sharing something relevant to the audience. And then you mentioned kind of mentioning, do hashtags work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, putting in relevant hashtags, particularly on LinkedIn and Twitter, which are most relevant for B2B, they're sure to get you found. And again, you're adding relevance in there with those hashtags.
Okay, good. So let's just move on to the next question. So once you've got your following kind of built, and I'm guessing that becomes like a bit of a flywheel. So once you've got your kind of engine moving in terms of generating those followers, then you can just kind of leave it to sort of run and run and run from there and get bigger and bigger. But obviously then once you have your followers, you need to then be able to engage with those followers. So what is the best way to engage with your audience?
Yeah, you're absolutely right in saying that it's like a flywheel and picking up momentum. But the best way to engage with your audience, or one of the best ways, is usually through educating and solving problems that they have. So that could either be issues that they're currently looking to solve, or perhaps ones that they're not even aware of yet. And that could be as simple as sharing a link to your latest educational blog or a how-to video, converting one of those into an infographic, the chances are that you've all spent a lot of time and investment in your content already. This is just another avenue to exploit that. Again, we mentioned influencers already. These don't need to be paid influencers. It could just be a very high profile influencer on social media. And it could be perhaps sharing someone else's content. It may be content or even just a tweet, like a stat, for example. Retweeting that for your audience, you're providing that value again, and you're engaging with each member of your audience, commenting on the tweet to raise your own profile. It's really important though, and this is perhaps the most important, but to engage with your audience when they engage with you. So it's making sure that you acknowledge your @, your comments, your direct mails where relevant. Social media is all about engagement, but that works both ways, regardless of whether it's a prospect or a customer, and making sure that they've got a platform to speak to you as much as you're speaking to them.
Okay, so when people engage with you, don't just ignore it. You have to then use that as an opportunity to communicate publicly. Is that right?
Yeah, completely. Of course, where it's relevant, but absolutely, it's an open platform. People use social media in a myriad of ways, not just for liking pictures of puppies. There's far more to it than that. Most people will do their research before making a purchase, and social media is one avenue to do that. If you're not replying to questions and comments, that could be detrimental, to those who aren't asking the questions, let alone to those that are.
And so you mentioned about puppies there, and obviously we talked about adding value and that sort of thing. What about, in B2B, can you be a bit jovial? Can you be a bit funny? Or is it all about, infographics and white papers?
No, of course, it's important to show your human side. I think probably something I want to touch on a little bit later, but it is important to show your human side, and to show that you aren't all robots. But this isn't the B2C space, and there's going to be a little bit less excitement on social media than you would see in B2C. But you've also got to remember that while your educational content might not be super exciting compared to B2C, actually when you're at work and you're trying to solve particular problems, that becomes exciting when you see the answer given there. And if puppies becomes relevant at some point, then absolutely, share that sort of thing, because it does make a difference. It is showing that there are people behind behind the screens at your business.
Okay. And if you do engage with your audience, what's the best way to do that? Do you do that on behalf of the business? Should you be a representative of the business? Should you include a link to your website or to an FAQ? Should you even include links in there, or does that depersonalize it? What's your view in that regard?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I think ultimately that kind of depends on the brand, and what the tone of voice is for that brand. For example, if it's very personable, you may want to approach them as a representative of the business, and include a name from someone from customer service, or someone from sales. But I think that like I said, that ultimately depends on the business. Including links back to frequently asked questions might be really helpful, but then sometimes it might even be more helpful just to answer there and then on the page.
Yeah, because obviously I know that we'll come on to this later, but obviously we are talking about how do we drive that traffic through from social to to the website. And I guess by driving people to, like you say, an FAQ page, whilst you don't want to depersonalize it, you could answer the question and then have, if you need any more information, this is where to go to, and then track that visit through so that you can then see the value of that. Would that be right?
Yeah, 100%. So it's about picking the right opportunities to drive that traffic. And like you
Yeah.
said, we'll come on to that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But you know, taking those opportunities to drive traffic where relevant are super important, and not concentrating too much on the engagements, and rather what you can do with those engagements.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So just let's move on to metrics and monitoring. So I'm a lover of those numbers. So what is it that you use to measure social media engagement?
So I think it's important that we explain what we mean by engagement in terms of social media, because we've thrown that
Yeah.
around quite a lot, that word. But in terms of a metric, what we're usually talking about there is things like likes, shares, and comments, not necessarily the engagement that we're giving back. But having those numbers allows us to calculate our engagement rate, and knowing our engagement rate allows us to sort of almost see the success for each post and platform off the back of that. And obviously, if we know how well a particular post is performing, how much engagement that post is getting, off the back of that, we can then optimize for particular posts, and it allows us to see what's resonating with an audience and what isn't. Perhaps it could be the fact that the audience interacts with posts better on Facebook over LinkedIn, for example.
And so, do you look at reach? I quite like the reach number. I know you can't get too excited about the reach of your messages, but in terms of metrics, it's quite nice to know how far it's getting out there, right? Do you ever use reach, or is that just a vanity metric that I like?
No, not at all. I think again we'll come on to that a little bit later, but reach, engagement rate, impressions, they're all super important metrics, and I think the importance is to understand the difference between your ultimate goal and what a key performance indicator is.
Yeah.
So these are KPIs rather than the end goal.
Yes. Yes. So they're a good indication, but they're not gonna pay your bills.
Yes.
They're not the monetization piece. Is that right?
Yeah, completely. So they are there to give some sort of guidance as to what's working and what's not, but it is a guidance and not the goal.
Okay. And how if it's the guidance, not the goal, how do you use that information to help you to get to the goal?
Yeah, so as we mentioned, there are loads of metrics that you can and should use to measure your social media engagement rate. It's just one of many. But what engagement rate allows us to do is optimize posts, as I said. See what's resonating with our audience, and making sure that we can produce something every single time.
Mhm.
Let's say that we share an ebook um, on social media, and we get a engagement rate of 0.05%, and later on in the month we share an infographic of the same subject, and that gets 0.09% engagement rate. Using that, we can see that the infographic is performing far better than an ebook, and perhaps for future posts we might want to focus on visually pleasing stats rather than a labor intensive ebook, for example. Um,
Okay.
but the caveat to that is, of course, the engagement rate, and all the social media metrics that we've just mentioned. As I said, they are a guide, and I think a lot of businesses make the mistake of obsessing over engagements. Really going out there for likes and shares, and they forget that there's more to social media. And we'll go back to that point you made about traffic and sharing links that come back to your website.
Hmm.
Referral traffic from social media can be a massive boost to your overall traffic volumes. If you're engaging with your audience in the right way, you'll be driving almost like pre-warmed traffic. And if you're focusing too much on what happens on the actual platform itself, and optimizing for engagement only, you're not necessarily doing anything with that engagement and driving traffic to your site.
Yeah.
And it would be kind of like sending out an email campaign and optimizing for opens, but nothing else.
Yes. Yes. So you kind of want to use the metrics to help with your continuous improvement of your social media strategy. So effectively using that insight to continually understand what the audience want and kind of turn that, 0.2% engagement to 0.5 to 1% to 1.5, that sort of thing. So you're continually evolving. But then you're wanting to then make sure that you get something quantifiable out of it rather than just like you say the vanity metrics. So I guess in my mind, if you can put just easily, like if you reply to a comment on LinkedIn or on Facebook or something like that, as a footer, just put your link to your website in, right, on every single comment, and instantly you're going to drive some traffic to your website. Instantly that's quantifiable, and instantly a proportion of those people are going to actually look further at what you do. So that's just one tiny little thing that could be done really easily. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. So I think you hit the nail on the head earlier in saying that answering a question and saying if you want more information, you can find it here, because that link is then super relevant, and you're actually using that engagement to your advantage, and really bringing the right kind of people who are genuinely interested in whatever it is that you've just posted,
Yeah.
and bringing them over to your website where they can potentially be converted.
Yes. Yes. And so in that, thinking about that, so what should a business be aiming for? So if it's not necessarily you're using posts and likes and shares and as a measure of engagement, what should a business actually be aiming for in terms of their I guess deliverable from social media?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no doubt that social media plays a crucial role in almost every marketing channel, every digital marketing channel, and even across the whole business. So whether that's helping retain your existing customers, or prospecting to new ones. It's really important to continue to serve your current customers, and still enjoying reveling in the engagement that you're getting from your followers. But it's just important not to forget that there's a real opportunity to drive some really relevant traffic to your site, and potential leads in there. So I've mentioned engagement rate. There are other super important metrics, as we've touched on already: reach, social share of voice, audience growth rate, and that sort of thing. But all of these offer a lot of insight into the performance rather than the goal itself. So without these metrics, you probably fall short of something meaningful for your audience, and they can highlight areas of under or over performance. But ultimately, you're there to drive sales, and that's what a business should be aiming for, measuring how much traffic is being driven to your site, and ultimately, are they filling in forms, and how much of that is converting to sales.
And so on that, so what sort of return should a business expect to see from social media? Is there a percentage, a benchmark that people can like pitch themselves at to see whether they're really winning or not doing so well? Is there a industry standard?
Yes, there's not quite an industry standard. That it will depend on on what industry you're in, what product you sell, the price point, and various other factors. But for B2B, you're probably looking at somewhere between 0.5 and 4%. Now that probably sounds a bit low, so I'm going to say a few things in response to that. And the first one is that obviously I've already touched on the fact that social media plays an incredibly important role in supporting the rest of the business, and that's much more difficult to measure its impact. So don't let a low number immediately think, well, what's the point of social media? It's a really important one. So you're probably already doing a lot of the right things. If you are tweaking your social media strategy slightly, it's already going to be a bonus on top of what you're already doing. So that 0.5 to 4% is a bonus on what you're already doing. If we also have a look at the kind of numbers that we're talking about for social media, they could actually potentially be quite massive. If you think about an average conversion for a website is actually 1 to 2%. And while while websites receive a lot more traffic, 0.5 to 4% could actually potentially be higher than a website conversion. So it's not to be not to turn your nose up at it, really. And finally, if you've got the right tools to measure, analyze, and optimize, you can really squeeze the last bits of value out of that percentage and really make it worth your while.
And so how can you track and measure your social success? I'm if you could see a graph, in terms of your performance going up and up, how can you do that?
So I think most social media management platforms, they'll give you plenty of useful metrics around posts and the success of posts and the platforms itself, but from a platform perspective. So that's our impressions, our reach, engagement rate, share of social share of voice, and that sort of thing. So if we're talking about website analytics, then something like Google Analytics will give you an overview of the traffic being referred from all of the major social platforms. This information is really helpful. It gives us an overview, as I said, of how your social strategy contributes to website traffic, and an idea of how platform success actually translates to traffic. Although on its own, the information, as I've said, it's very much an overview. It doesn't boil down to a great deal of detail. So I think that we need to ask, what does success look like, and we need to look at what we're measuring. And in my view, we should be measuring the traffic and the form fills, the leads that are coming through. And so that would be more the side of Google Analytics and various other tools to see how that's actually translating from the social media platforms.
Okay, so you've got your kind of your standard social media scheduling tools that can provide you with insight into your engagement and stuff like that. And I'm not endorsing any software here, but like you've got your Hootsuite, you've got your HubSpot, you've got your Sprout, all sorts of others that can, social media schedule. And so that gives you some insight. You've also got your like media toolkit that can give you more information about your general online reach. And then you've obviously got your tools to look at, right, what is that meaning to me in terms of driving traffic to my website? And therein you've got your Google Analytics. Obviously lead forensics falls into that camp. Am I kind of missing anything? Because obviously I'm trying to look at tools that are high end, expensive, and also lower end. Hootsuite, for example, for social scheduling is really cost effective. So is there anything else that I've missed there that might be helpful for people?
In terms of an overview, there are a bundle of tools out there, each offering different things, and I think ultimately you'd need to look at the rest of your tech stack to see what fits in with that.
Yeah.
I think also how you intend to track individual social posts. I think that will play a part in which technology you decide to use as well.
Okay. Good. And so then we've just kind of touched on this, but in terms of tracking social posts through to your website, so specific posts through, obviously we've mentioned that you know, you can use Google Analytics. We've talked about a little bit about how lead forensics can help with that. But can you track specific engagement on specific posts, for example, or a specific social campaign rather than just holistic social media that visitors come from Facebook? Can you be more specific than that?
Yeah, of course. And it's old but gold, as they say, and it's UTM tracking, which is a really great way to attribute traffic to an individual post.
Okay.
So you know, you've also got the added benefit when you're using UTM tracking, that, you know, if someone fills out a form, you can attribute that directly again to an individual post. So even if they've landed on a piece of content from your social post, they browse your site and end up on the pricing page and fill out a form there. With that UTM tracking, you know, you can potentially see that that lead has come directly from this particular post on LinkedIn, or this one has come from Twitter.
Yeah.
And that way you can really see, you know, what's successful in terms of traffic conversions, and not just see what's successful from an engagement point of view.
And is UTM tracking difficult to set up? Is it easy? Because it's one of those things that sounds really complicated, right? So, is it laborious in terms of getting that set up for each and every post that you might, I don't know, schedule on your social media scheduler? How would you get started with UTM tracking?
Yeah, so it looks and sounds really complicated when you first mention it. And if you've ever seen a UTM link, a bare UTM link, it can look really complicated with lots of equal signs and question marks and things like that. But there are so many tools out there, and again, we touched on a few tools a moment ago. But something like Bitly, which has a free version as well. So that will shorten your link, but you can also provide, or also provides you the option of putting in UTM parameters in there, and it's a case of just filling out a box. And if you didn't want to shorten your links, it's also very easy to use a UTM builder, which can be created in Google Sheets. I think that we've got one on the Lead Forensics site, which we can perhaps share with the recording. So yeah, it's actually really easy to set that up for each post.
Okay, so you can do a shortener, so like you say, Bitly, your tiny URL, that sort of thing, that can all help you to kind of automatically set up your UTM tracking. But you can also do that yourself within a Google Sheets document. So it's really easy to do. It sounds complicated, but it's not. And then it will enable you to have much more granular insight into what on social media is driving to your traffic to your website and what isn't. And so you just can do more of the stuff that is driving traffic and actually having a holistic benefit for your business that actually is meaningful rather than just vanity. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, and how can we maximize the return then? Was there anything else that we can do to really drive up the return from social media posts?
Yeah, 100%. So technology is definitely the best way to go in maximizing any of your social efforts. And we can take this a lot further than the UTM tracking as well. So as with any marketing channel, if you can measure it, you can improve it, and optimize it. So there are more analytics that you have available to you. So even if you don't focus on all of the data all of the time, some of the data that technology can provide, you know, can have an instant and long-term impact. So we've already talked about conversion rate of social earlier, and as long as you are driving, you know, relevant traffic, we're not being misleading in our posts. All of that traffic that you're driving to the site should be super relevant to the business. So obviously you've already touched on lead forensics, Lila. You know, using lead forensics using lead forensics, you can identify the individual businesses that are visiting your site. And if you're using that in conjunction with UTM tracking, you can actually identify the individual businesses that are driven there by the specific post and specific platform as well. And then also be given the means of contacting those businesses and have a point of conversation, really specific to the post that drove them to the site in the first place.
Mm. And so we use pipeline marketing a lot here, whereby we consider every single stage of the journey, from that person, very first seeing a post on LinkedIn or on Facebook or whatever, and then deciding to follow and that sort of thing. And we look at the conversions at every single stage. And so I guess in terms of maximizing the return, then if you can map out that journey and your current conversions at every stage, so how many posts do I send out, what's my current conversion on those, how many followers do I have, what's my current month-on-month uplift, all that sort of stuff, and then you put in almost like lots of little things to improve every stage of that journey, then holistically all of those things are going to have a big impact, and that can really help to maximize the return from social media, right? It's not just going to be one big thing that will make a fundamental difference. It's almost mapping that journey and looking at what conversions we get at every stage, and thinking, right, okay, if my conversion is 1%, well, how can I get that to 1.5%? And then how do I get that to 2%? And then looking at the next stage in the journey, okay, how much traffic is coming to my website from Facebook? Well, okay, how can I push that up ever so slightly? What's my current engagement rates? Well, how can I push that up ever so slightly? And basically, if every single stage in the journey increases by just marginal gains, that will make a difference. Is that right, Pete? Have you got anything else to add to that?
No, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because obviously we mentioned the metrics from that you're likely to get from a social media management platform, and then we talked about Google Analytics, and then UTM tracking and lead forensics, and they're all tools that will help you at different stages of that funnel. And I also mentioned about having a look at all of this data and seeing where your underperformances are and where your overperformances are. So I think it's a really valid point, that it's about gathering all of this data, and like I said, even if you don't use all the data all the time, using those tools to get those incremental gains.
And are there any other tools that we've mentioned? Because we've mentioned a few now. So we've mentioned Google Analytics, obviously we've mentioned lead forensics, we've mentioned Bitly, we've mentioned Tiny URL, we've mentioned what else did we mention? Sprout, we've mentioned HubSpot, we've mentioned Hootsuite, I think I mentioned earlier on as well. Is there anything else? Oh, I think I mentioned Media Toolkit as well. Is there anything else that you think is fundamental in terms of being able to effectively track that social media, so that then you can give that social media strategy a boost and then kind of monetize the return?
Yeah, so I think it would probably just be a recap of what you said, really. I mean, something like Hootsuite, Sprout Social, Sendable, that there are loads of social media management platforms that can offer those metrics, and it'd be about finding which one fits with your existing tech stack, I think, really. Google Analytics is the most common, but there are other analytics software available. But for basic web analytics and keeping track of the overview of which platforms are driving the most referrals, you can also measure which individual posts are driving traffic, and then ultimately using lead forensics, like you said, to monetize that, really. So not just waiting for form fills, but actively engaging with that traffic, with your audience, when they're showing real intent, and getting to them before they shop around, really, and really maximizing that 0.5 to 4%, really getting to the top end of that potential conversion.
And you don't necessarily need to have any of those tools, right, to be able to do UTM tracking. So you don't actually need to have a social social scheduling tool. to be able to benefit from UTM tracking. You don't need to have you know, a website tracking technology. You don't need to use Bitly or tinyurl. You can just do that yourself, right, with a, you know, a quick you know, tutorial on how to set up UTM tracking within, like, say, Google Sheets or something like that. But it's simple to do, and you don't actually need to invest in anything. Is that correct?
Yep, completely correct. Yeah, so I think that, again, that's a really important point as well, that a lot of the social channels will, the platforms will actually provide, you know, some form of analytics for you based on the performance and engagement of posts. So you can get that kind of data from there. You don't need to pay for anything to get your UTM set up. Bitly has a free version, or you can use the Google, as you mentioned. So in order to get this set up, you can test it for free.
Okay, good. And so, you know, if you're going to start looking at monitoring that pipeline to ensure your success, UTM tracking is absolutely something that will help you with that. And it doesn't need to cost anything, which is a bonus for everybody, especially if you're going to trial something new. Having said that, I do want to also offer everybody on this call a trial of Lead Forensics. Again, there's no fee, no catch, no commitment. We just want to let you trial it on trial Lead Forensics on your website, so you can see what social media traffic you do have coming to your website, which businesses are visiting your website off of the back of your enhanced social media activity, which I'm sure you'll do after this chat today. No catch, no commitment. You can see which businesses are visiting your website in real time and responding to not just your social media efforts, but also any other campaign-based marketing, SEO, PPC, all that sort of thing. You can use the data captured in your trial to fuel your marketing automation campaigns, and also pass them to your sales team to see whether you can actually drive any you know, revenue into your business as a result. It's our way of kind of giving you the chance to take a look at Lead Forensics, you know, for free, and to also obviously thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us today. So we are going to pop up a little poll. If you do want to take a trial of Lead Forensics, let us know, and what we'll do is we'll just leave it up for a couple of minutes before we, or a couple of seconds even, before we wrap up. Obviously, if you do decide that you would like to take a trial of Lead Forensics, then we'll be in touch with you probably in the next 24 hours to get that set up. Just be a small piece of code that is popped onto your website, and then we can start tracking your website visitors straight away. If you don't wish to take a trial of Lead Forensics, or you're a current customer, well, that's brilliant if you're a current customer. But if you you know, don't wish to take a trial, then that is no problem at all. So just moving on there. So we also have some other webinars coming up. So I'm just going to do another quick poll, if that's okay, just to see if you'd like to join us for future webinars. So let us know if you would like to join us another time. Obviously, if you don't wish to join us, then just hit the no button. But what that will do is it will automatically register you for our next marketing webinar, which is coming up towards the back end of February. So we'll just confirm that date with you closer to the time. So let us know if you'd like to join us for a further webinar. And then I think, Pete, what we'll do is we'll just wrap up and wish everyone a good day. So in summary, what are your key takeaways? You know, if people kind of leave this session just with one or two things in their mind, what should that be?
Yeah, so I think it's to remember to offer value to your followers. So, you know, make sure that you share content that's really relevant, that's going to help them. You know, as I said before, it might not be super exciting content, or it might not seem like super exciting content when you compare that to B2C, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. You know, just make sure it's educational, relevant, and your audience will see value in it. To see engagement as a KPI and not the goal. You know, don't get caught up with the engagement rate and getting likes and shares if they're not relevant. They're really helpful, but not you know, they're not all going to drive traffic if you're just concentrating on engagement. Measure, monitor, grow, and convert. So as Lila touched on earlier, you know, making sure that you're tracking as much as you can, and analysing where your overperformances are and when your underperformances are, trying to rectify those underperformances, and trying to replicate those overperformances. And use technology wherever you can. There's plenty of free technology out there. Obviously, we've touched on lead forensics for converting the traffic, Google Analytics for measuring the success, and the social media management tools for measuring the platform KPIs as well. But make sure you use that technology to get the most out of your social and the traffic.
Super. And UTM tracking. Right,
UTM tracking.
UTM
Yes.
tracking, if that's one thing you take away, is just to find out a little bit more about how you can leverage UTM tracking within your social media marketing. So I guess that leaves it to me to say, firstly, thank you for your insight, Pete, today. It's been really interesting and I've really enjoyed talking to you. So thank you for that. Apologies if we didn't get around to answering any of your questions. We will follow up with you afterwards. You can, if you want, reach myself or Pete, more importantly, on LinkedIn, should you have any questions that you want to pose directly. We're both, I'm going to say, fairly easy to find. I know I am, given my name. Pete, I think you're quite easy to find too.
Likewise, given my name.
So you should be able to find us on LinkedIn if you have any other questions, and we'll be more than happy to help. Otherwise, I hope you'll join us again for another conversation, and we'll wish you a good day or a good evening, depending upon where you are. But thank you so much for joining us. Bye bye.